Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaskar. You have stepped into a course that is going to change the way that you look at data. Not just how you analyze it, but also how you communicate it. My name is Nivid Desai. I serve as the Program Executive at Writing Studio IIT Gandhinagar. Welcome to Writing for Data Science. This course is at the intersection of analysis and communication. As all of us know, data analysis is not just about coding and models. It is about solving real-world problems. And that is exactly why every single thought that goes into solving those problems needs to be communicated. And not just to one audience, across multiple stakeholders. That is where this course comes in. This course prepares you with the foundations of writing, especially curated for data science. We will discuss audience analysis, critical thinking, logical reasoning, as well as storytelling that is native to data science. So join me on a journey at the intersection of numbers and narratives. I'll see you in class. Namaste, hello and welcome to Writing for Data Science. My name is Nivid Desai and we are on a journey to explore the interesting intersections between numbers and narratives. This is the final lecture of our module on critical thinking and logical reasoning. We have had an interesting journey exploring a completely new topic from a lens of analysis, and we have also seen how it starts reflecting into our writing. We went through the foundations of critical thinking, the foundations of logical reasoning. We looked at the mistakes that we make. We looked at steps to avoid those mistakes. And we also learned how we can work together to improve our writing as an effort into careful, considerate, and conscious communication. So today's class is a wrap-up of our entire module. We'll look at some key concepts, revise them, and learn how to integrate critical thinking into our reports. So how do they look in action? We'll find out today. In the final lecture, I want to highlight and underline the approach that we have taken throughout this module. Writing is thinking made clear. As we come to the final lecture in this module, we must return to this central idea that writing is not just the end product of thinking. It is part of the thinking itself. In data science, the final report or presentation is often what your audience sees, but what they are really engaging with is your reasoning. How you interpreted the data, how you formed your claims, and how clearly and ethically you expressed your findings. They may just be seeing the presentation that you are putting up on the screen. They may just be reading the words on the paper. But beyond all of this, it is your entire process that they are interacting with and being influenced by. That is why we are talking about critical thinking and logical reasoning as integral aspects of our writing process. Before we begin the summary of our core concepts, here's a quick reflection. Think about how your understanding has changed of writing over this module. Is it more about communication or more about how you think? Think about how this module, talking about critical thinking, talking about logical reasoning, has evolved your understanding of both writing and communication. It will remind you to know more about why both of these qualities are integral to our understanding of writing. Let's first look at some core concepts that we have understood throughout this module. First, we looked at critical thinking. Critical thinking means learning to ask deeper questions, challenge assumptions, and seek clarity before drawing conclusions. Here's an example. Instead of, why didn't this model perform well? You can ask, what assumptions did we make during the training of this module? This is critical thinking in action. You are asking a deeper question. You are challenging an assumption that you may have made. Instead of asking a direct question that is not leading anywhere, you are asking a critical question that can open up new possibilities of looking at the same situation. This helps you arrive at clarity in thinking before you draw any faulty or misguided conclusions. After establishing our base in critical thinking, we arrived at logical reasoning. Logical reasoning is building structured arguments with clear premises, sound inferences, and defensible conclusions. For example, the premise can be something like 90% of survey participants reported confusion during onboarding. Therefore, the conclusion can be, we should investigate usability and offer help within the first 5 minutes of onboarding. The clear premise builds to a defensible conclusion. The kind of inferences that we draw in the meantime should also be logically sound. The kind of assumptions that we make should not drive us away from the conclusion, but towards the conclusion. We learnt about all of this in detail. We looked at inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning, and how they move through logic in different beats and different rhythms. Then we talked about logical fallacies. Fallacies are nothing but mistakes, biases that we might have in our thinking, which will start reflecting in our analysis. After building a strong foundation of critical thinking and logical reasoning, we arrived at logical fallacies. Fallacies are nothing but mistakes and biases that will start reflecting in our analysis without us knowing it consciously. So we looked at avoiding reasoning traps like correlation equals causation, cherry-picking data, or confirmation bias. We saw how each of them can lead to faulty analysis and even riskier decision-making, which will not work well in the longer run. So we learned, for example, to not write sales rose after our email campaign, therefore the campaign caused the rise. This is confusing correlation with causation. So instead, we do write, while sales rose after the email campaign, seasonal trends may have contributed. This opens up the possibility of multiple factors influencing the final result. We also learned how to evaluate sources and claims, checking who produced the data. Is the data reliable? Why it was collected? What was the purpose of collecting this data? And how reliable the claim is before using it in your report. We learned how to evaluate all of this to ensure that our analysis is as watertight as possible. Then we learned how to structure our arguments. We looked at claims, evidence, and warrants. And we saw how to use all of them to write arguments that hold together and communicate clearly. Claims are assertions that arise from data. Evidence is the source that supports that data. And then warrant is what connects the claim with the evidence. For example, the claim the feature increased retention demands the evidence. Retention rose from 64% to 78% post-launch. Now the warrant will connect the claim with the evidence by saying this change is likely linked to improved user experience. Now we arrived at peer review and collaborative critique. In this lecture, we looked at welcoming questions and alternative perspectives to improve your logic, tone, and impact. This was the summary of everything that we did in our module and all the highlights that will help us learn today's lesson the best. How to make sure that critical thinking starts improving our reports. So, I want you to pause for a moment, think about everything that we have learned, maybe revise the notes that you have made, can come back so that we can start discussing how critical thinking improves your reports. Now that we have done a quick run through all our core concepts, let's look at how critical thinking improves our data science reports. First of all, the critical thinking becomes a part of our data science reports in terms of clarity of purpose. You start with a clear research question, an objective, or decision point. A weak form of writing would be, this report covers customer feedback. This right here is not critically thought through. Therefore, once you start thinking about it critically, the strong version arises that this report analyzes feedback trends to improve user satisfaction among new app users in the first 14 days. You are anticipating the information that the reader might want, and it will end up enriching your question, your objective, your decision point with as much critical clarity as possible. Then it gives your reports a logical structure. You arrange your findings in an order that makes sense. The what, the how, and the why it matters, and the what to do next. All of these are themes which will start reflecting in your reports because your entire logic is arranged in a progressive manner. The example flow can be something like this: key findings, followed by supporting data, followed by explanation of pattern, followed by limitations or assumptions, and in the end, closing with the recommendations. Now, you also start looking at the underlying strength of your writing. Critical thinking influences your reports with reasoned conclusions. Instead of jumping straight to action, you explain what the data suggests and what it does not suggest. So you also start looking at the limitations and weaknesses of your conclusion. For example, while the churn model shows 85% accuracy, it underperforms on users over 60. Recommendations based on this model should consider demographic adjustments. This is a reasoned conclusion. It is not jumping straight to an action. It is not bloating any kind of statistics, but it is highlighting what the clear data indicates as well as the limitations of the model's performance. Critical thinking also enhances the ethical and the audience awareness of your report. You consider who will read the report and how your language, framing, and visuals may influence their understanding. This right here is a core component as we have also understood in the previous module on audience analysis. For example, you can use softer phrasing like indicates instead of proves and explain what accuracy means in real world terms. These are all decisions that you will need to take with intent and with reason, which will start reflecting in the language that you choose, the format that you choose, and the analogies that you provide for a non-technical audience. It will also make you foolproof from making any tall, broad, sweeping claims from your data, which may end up becoming untrue. Therefore, all of these are properties empowered by critical thinking, which will start reflecting in your reports tacitly or explicitly. Now that we have understood how critical thinking influences our data reports, let's look at some best practices for integrating critical thinking into our writing. What should you actually do in terms of actionable steps that can help us start reflecting our critical side into our writing? Number one, you must plan your argument first. Don't just write the data, write your reasoning plan. These questions can help. What's the main insight? What supports it? What could challenge it? All of these are indicators in the directions which will build your reasoning. Don't just report the data. We have learned in this module and the last one that we are not here to just report statistics. We are here to communicate insights. And insights can only be born out of reason. Once you have done this, you can annotate your draft with questions. As you write in a progressive manner, mark places where you assume, generalize, or skip a step. For example, you can ask, am I connecting my evidence to my claim? Is my warrant strong? Have I explained why this matters? Because all of these may be obvious to us as writers, as communicators, but our audience may need that connecting bridge to make sense of what we are presenting in front of them. Once you've done that, you start reviewing the document for gaps and assumptions. This can be worked in collaboration. You can ask somebody else, a peer, a colleague, to read it and ask these questions. Does this conclusion follow from the data? Is anything missing? Is this persuasive and fair? All of this we have learned in our recent lecture on peer review and collaborative critique. And that is your final step for ensuring critical thinking within your data reports. Here's an exercise for you before we move forward. Take this statement. Our dashboard solves the problem of data overload. You must revise it to include critical thinking, acknowledge the limits, offer the evidence, or clarify the assumptions that you might be making. Take the statement and spruce it up with as much critical thinking power as you can. I will come back to you with a broader picture version of why this matters beyond just your reports. As we bring this module to a conclusion, I understand that we are mostly looking at writing within the realm of data science. And that is why most of our conversation, even about critical thinking or logical reasoning, have centered around the practice of writing within data science. And much of it is centered around reports. But I also must emphasize why all of this, all that we have discussed over the past 10 lectures, matters beyond the reports. So whether you are presenting to stakeholders, writing an internal memo, or publishing in an academic or industry forum, your credibility depends not just on your results, but on your reasoning. Critical thinking is what protects your audience from misinformation, your teammates from blind spots, and your own work from falling into shallow or biased interpretation. Your writing is the clearest window into your thinking. The clearer your reasoning, the stronger your writing, and the more trust you earn from your audience. The final reflection for this module asks us, what's the one way that your writing will be different after learning to integrate critical thinking? Think about it. We have discussed enough aspects of critical thinking in our 10 lectures for this module. Think about how it has informed your approach towards writing and how it may grow from this point onwards and how different it may look. I will get back to you with the final comments for this module. To close this module, I must emphasize that critical thinking and logical reasoning look at writing as integrity. To close this module, we must remember that critical thinking is not about being negative. It is about being careful, thoughtful, and responsible. It is what allows data scientists not just to analyze numbers, but to tell the truth, respect the complexity, and communicate with integrity. With this module, we have not just learned how to write better, we have learned how to think better. And that is a skill that will serve us in every data set, every project, and every decision to come. And I hope that we are there for it with all our tools ready to be deployed. That was it from my side. We concluded not just today's lecture, but also the module on critical thinking and logical reasoning. I hope that we have left this module more informed and more aware of all that our data can do and the kind of discretion that we must practice, the kind of critical inquiry that we must practice to ensure that we can harness that potential in the right direction. This module was built to equip us with the right tools, the right mindset, and the right perspective to access data from a point of conscious awareness. In the next module, we will look at a rather functional, a rather fun aspect of data communication, storytelling with data. And that is going to be our final module for our course on writing for data science. I'm extremely excited to begin discussing storytelling with you. We will look at the foundational principles of storytelling, some case studies, and how to implement those principles into our communication with data to make it more persuasive, to make it more effective, and to make it memorable for all audiences, technical and non-technical. I cannot begin to describe how elated I am that I will begin this module from the next lecture, and I hope that you are there to start that journey into the world of storytelling. That is going to be the culmination of a line that I often say at the beginning of my lectures. the interesting intersection of numbers and narratives. The narrative part coming up next. Until then, thank you so much for being with me today. Stay curious, keep learning, all the best. I will see you in the next class with a final module for writing for data science, storytelling with data. Thank you. Namaskar.